Thank you all for coming in this morning. My name is Patrick Devine-Wright, and I'm a professor at the University of Exeter, and I'm the director of the Access Network. Thank you. On to Kate. Can I hand over to you then, please?
Hi, I'm Kate Birmingham. I'm a sociologist at the University of Surrey. I'm on the leadership team for Access, and I'm part of the team that's designed the guiding principles for Access, and I'm here to answer any questions people have about that.
Michelle, would you like to go next?
I'm one of the research fellows on the Access project, and I've been part of the development of the Flex Fund.
Thank you. Sue Williams, could you just introduce yourself briefly, please?
Sue Williams, I'm head of social research at Natural Resources Wales, and I'm involved in the Access leadership team and probably most of the work packages. I'm here probably to help answer questions about non-academic stakeholders. Thank
you very much. Becky, you're up next, please.
Hi, thanks very much for attending. My name is Becky Harwood. I'm based at the University of Exeter, and I'm the project manager on Access. And today, my questions I could probably answer for you are around the application process itself, the logistics side.
Thanks. And Peter.
Hi everyone, my name is Peter. I'm supporting the Access project at the University of Exeter. I'll be monitoring the chat today, so if anyone's got any questions about the webinar itself, can't see anything, put some information in there, and I'll also be monitoring the Padlet for questions about the fund, which we'll mention in just a minute.
Great. Okay.
Lovely. Patrick, shall I start sharing the screen for our PowerPoint today?
Yeah, go for it, Sarah. Yeah, thank you. And we'll kick off and get going. We have limited time. Right, so welcome everybody. We've got some slides to share, and we will make the slides and a recording, an audio recording of this webinar available on the website of the Access Network under the Flex Fund in due course over the next few days. And as you can see from that initial slide, and no doubt in the chat, we have put a Padlet together so you can put down any questions or queries you might have as we're going along. And if you do wish to kind of openly put your hand up and say that you might be interested in collaborations, there's also a space there, I think, where you can make yourself known and signal your interest in being contacted by other parties for team building purposes. So yeah, let's proceed then with the next slide. Thank you. Great. Okay. Well, I mean, hopefully most of you will know this already, but Access is a 5-year program which has been funded by the UKRI Economic and Social Research Council. And it's pretty unusual. It's not just a typical kind of research program or center as is customarily funded by those institutions. Instead, we have an aim to provide leadership on the social science contributions to tackling and solving a range of environmental challenges. And it's based on the presumption, which we're all hopeful and optimistic about, that actually the social sciences have got something useful and interesting and even vital to say in terms of contributing insights and data and knowledge which will be needed to solve and address those environmental problems. And the overall aim of Access is to enhance the visibility, the use and the impact of social science, characterized in a very interdisciplinary manner, in order to solve the range of environmental crises and problems that we face. And so the Flex Fund is one part of our program, and everything we do has to speak back to that overall aim of enhancing visibility, use and impact of the social sciences, with that broader aim of tackling these environmental challenges in mind. So on to the next slide, please. Now, the diagram on the left is a little bit busy, so pardon for that, but basically what we want to ensure is that proposals that come in under the Flex Fund don't duplicate activities that we're already doing ourselves. We want the Flex Fund to bring added value and extra ideas, extra activities. And so I just wanted to very briefly label these, and they're available on our website too, of course, in terms of the detail of what we're doing. So, I mean, the first thing to say about this diagram on the left, in a sense, is to look at that kind of the propeller blades, which are our cross-cutting themes or guiding principles, and which Kate is here to talk about too. But we really want everything that we do as a project, including the flexible fund projects, to kind of give life to our guiding principles. And that means doing social science in a way that is in keeping with ideas about sustainability and minimizing environmental impacts that come from the activities of researchers ourselves or collaborative teams. It's also about making sure that we really do something about EDI issues, equality, diversity, and inclusion. They're not just nice sounding words, but we put them into practice in some concrete shape or form. And finally, in terms of how we go about working with people from other disciplines or other institutions and different sectors, we have a kind of a co-production approach. So we're not starting off by saying, we hold all the answers and we just need to kind of tell people what the solutions are, and then it's their job to get on with them in a very kind of linear dissemination process. Instead, we're much more interested in a kind of co-production approach where we start conversations early with other partners and involve them all the way through. And that's our vision for how we can have impact. We have 4 major work packages. The first one is about reviewing how the social sciences have worked before in relation to education, research, and policy. So it's a little bit of kind of review and research work being led by the University of Surrey to see how social sciences have been employed in the past or not, as the case may be. We are already doing quite a lot of skills and training and capacity building exercises, including annual PhD summer schools. And we're putting together a leadership college, which will be meeting for the first time in April, which is a cohort of emerging leaders in climate and environment social science. Work package 3 at the bottom of the diagram includes the Flex Fund, which we're here today to talk about, but also some other things which you may or may not know about already, including our kind of agile response work. We're soon to start our first task force, and we've already been doing kind of responsive work for, say, different devolved governments or devolved administrations and government departments, fielding access to inquiries about social science expertise or insights. We're also doing some scoping or horizon scanning work with ESRC about future research calls, and we'll be doing a citizens panel this year and repeated in subsequent years, which are testing some ideas about public views of environmental problems and the role of social science in addressing those. Finally, there's a significant data element to the project, which is about making sure that it's visible and exchanged, and some capacity building activities. And also we have some ideas about using social media tools in order to track public engagement and doing annual events like an annual assembly to try and enable coordination across different academic investments and teams. So there's quite a lot of busy activities already happening there. And what we're looking for the Flex Fund to do is to bring additional capacity and ideas and people into our network that go beyond what we are able to do with the resources we have and the time that we've got. So next slide, please. So the round 1 for the Flex Fund, the call has already been released, and we're looking for small grants, likely up to the value of about 30k, and we have about 250k altogether to release on this. And the overall package in the Flex Fund is £1 million. So most of the resource is going to be made available next year and in subsequent years in a larger round 2. So do bear that in mind. And the aim of the Flex Fund is very consistent with the overall aims of the Access Network and project, which is to test and develop new ways of thinking, new approaches, new networks that will advance the impact of the social sciences in addressing the transition to a more sustainable and biodiverse environment and net zero society. So the call opened 1 week ago, and the closing date is towards the end of June, on the 23rd of June. So we've deliberately tried to maximize the time available to you all to prepare and submit applications, because we do recognize that it takes time to put teams of collaborations in place, particularly when they involve or welcome non-academic institutions and collaborating organizations. So we're trying to give you as much time as possible in order to build those teams and create those networks which can produce high quality applications. We've then given ourselves about a month across the end of June and July to do peer review, And then we hope the projects will commence by September. So that's the kind of timeline for this. And do bear in mind, as I said, that the project runs until the beginning of 2027, and there is a lot more money available in the Flex Fund beyond this fairly small grant round one, and we'll be giving you more information about that early next year with another call for proposals for larger grants coming out in round two in due course. Sarah, on to the next slide, please. So, in keeping with the overall philosophy of the Access project itself, the Flex Fund is not primarily being positioned as a call for new research. It could do, but that's not primarily its function or how we see it. And we've just given some illustrative examples here, which please do not be restricted by in any way. But if you're thinking about what these kind of proposals might look like, then these might be some useful ideas to suggest. So it could be pilot projects which are trialing or experimenting with new ideas, new methods, new practices that advance the use of the social sciences to tackle environmental challenges. It could be about developing and testing new kinds of resources to communicate social science to different kinds of target audiences. How best do you get across the message of what the social sciences can contribute, the different perspectives of different disciplines, for example, or different areas of study? And there can be all manner of different formats which could be devised or scoped or tested in some way as part of that kind of development or pilot activities. Because Access is about connecting up, it could be about proposing events which promote collaborations across different kinds of boundaries, so disciplinary boundaries or sectoral boundaries. These could be a workshop or a series of workshops which could be conducted over time to try and build bridges and try and create networks and kind of raise awareness or raise understanding of different issues in the process of doing so. As mentioned, there's a very strong emphasis in Access upon the skills and capacities that early career researchers might need to have in order to flourish in interdisciplinary contexts, which might be needed with co-production to solve these environmental challenges. So what kind of capacity development that's novel might enable that, to enable these collaborations across those kinds of boundaries? And finally, there might well be quite useful pieces of research that would be useful to do involving secondary data that already exists or primary data collection, which might gauge the different roles of different disciplines or different perspectives or different topic areas in terms of finding out more about the contribution of the social sciences to addressing these environmental problems. So, but these are just some illustrative ideas. As I said, please do not be restricted to these. So we have deliberately decided to structure the Flex Fund to have relatively small grants in the first round, which are designed to appeal to researchers with comparatively less experience of winning large grant awards so far. Now, early career researchers, it's not a very easy thing to very strictly or legalistically define, but we've decided, having canvassed the views of other kinds of funding streams and other projects that are out there, to use these basic criteria to diagnose who can be classed as an ECR. And in that sense, it should be applicants who have not previously held a research grant exceeding the value of 100,000, or it can be people who hold some kind of fixed term or project-related contract. So they're not permanently employed in institutions. And so that kind of contractual status is part of that definition, or their grant funding success so far. And what that means is that what we're trying to do here is to try and enable people to have successful grant applications under their belt, and potentially also provide a pipeline so that people could go on from being successful in round one to be successful in round two as well, although you don't need to be involved in round one to submit a bid in round two next year as well. Now, this can raise issues about being involved in projects, and for a long time, it's been challenging for fixed-term postdoctoral researchers to be involved in ESRC or UKRI bids that go beyond their contract length. So what we are proposing is that potential applicants, especially ECRs who might be occupying the principal investigator or lead investigator role, that you have conversations with your institutions, heads of department, etc., about providing some kind of indicative letter or commitment so that you can be involved for the duration of your Flex Fund awards, however that might be. And we haven't stipulated that too much because we want to give you as much flexibility as possible. We're assuming that given the relatively small amounts of resource available, projects will be somewhere between 3 and 12 months in length. So that duration and its relevance to your current contractual position is something to think about carefully, and if necessary, to go about securing the relevant letters and permissions that you might need. And come back to us if you've got any queries on that in terms of technicalities. Sarah, next slide, please. Or are we moving on to Michelle? Yes, we are. I can take a little break. Over to you, Michelle.
Hi, everybody. So as I introduced myself at the beginning, I'm Michelle Spruce, one of the Knowledge Exchange Fellows on the project. I'm based at the University of Exeter. The project has fellows from Exeter, Surrey and Sussex, and you can see all of our friendly faces on the slide there. Now, the reason I'm talking to you now is just to kind of reiterate the fact that early career researchers have had a part in development of the Flex Fund from the outset. So our views and our perspective have been taken into consideration in development of the fund. And this first call, as Patrick has already mentioned, has been designed with early career researchers in mind. So if you've got limited grant experience, it's not an onerous process. It's a fairly short form. It's a good opportunity to get a grant under your belt. It levels the playing field with more established researchers in terms of the process. As I said before, we've been involved in development of the fund, but we'll also be part of the peer review and review panel as well. So ECR perspective will be taken into account all the way through. And it's also great that if you are a postdoc on a fixed term contract, I'm one of those, and there's many of us, there is an opportunity if you get the suitable letter from your institution to support you beyond the end of your fixed term contract to work on the project. And then a couple of the selling points from our perspective is this is a great opportunity as an early career researcher to lead or co-lead a project. And also the funding, it comes from the ESRC through the Access project, and that's only going to look good on your CV because it's UKRI funding. So happy if anybody wants to drop any questions in the chat to me, I'll happily answer them. But that's everything from me. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Michelle. That's brilliant. On to the next slide. And this is where we hand over to Sue. Sue, would you like to speak to a few points about being involved in kind of partnership working with non-academic institutions?
Yeah, just briefly to say that in addition to the points on the slide, think about what are the evidence needs or the research needs of your stakeholders, rather than obviously going forward with a proposal and then asking people to join in. Consider how actionable your work might be or your proposal might be by those people that you are working with. So can it be put into practice by some of those other organisations? Think a bit about the outputs that you might produce. And I know that's one of the key themes that's already been flagged. And in terms of career development, I just wanted to say it's a really good opportunity for early career researchers to learn about social science in non-academic sectors, whether that's the third sector, business sector, or public and policy sector. Thanks.
Okay, thanks very much, Sue. And a very useful point made there that social scientists don't just reside inside universities, they're everywhere actually if you go looking for them, but there are some very expert social scientists who work in other sectors and who can be brought into the Flex Fund and the Access Network through these collaborative teams. So I mean, it's very important to be very clear about what the criteria that will be used in the evaluation process. So these are the 5 that we've settled on. It must be about advancing the use of social science to address climate and environmental challenges. So the social science component of it and the contribution of social science to solving environmental problems has to be extremely clear in terms of what's involved in it and what's it for, what's the purpose or goal. That must be very clear. So we'll need to know what environmental challenges any proposals are targeted towards and what kind of social science is being brought to bear to address that. That all needs to be really clear. Secondly, we're looking at a criterion around impact. So it will be useful to specify what kinds of outputs any particular project might produce and how those in turn might lead to particular outcomes. So do be clear about the distinction between outputs and outcomes and make them as clear as possible in your application so we can evaluate them accordingly. Thirdly, we're looking for novelty. We're actually looking for high risk, high reward proposals, but have some significance in addressing those environmental challenges. We're less interested in incremental submissions that tweak existing ideas or tweak existing methods. We'd really like people to be very innovative here and not to worry too much if you're proposing something which might really not work out, because there'll be an awful lot of learning, we're presuming, in any kind of trialing or testing process. And that's just as useful to us as more, something that might succeed but be only an incremental contribution to knowledge. So do go for novelty as far as you can and signal why it's novel in your submission. You will need to describe how you're going to go about doing your project, and you will need to specify how our guiding principles are informing your approach and what you're planning to do. And as I've mentioned already, they include sustainability and environmental impact, they include EDI, and they include the approach of co-production in working in collaboration with other kinds of partners. And finally, there will be an assessment of value for money. So think carefully about what you're requesting resource for and thinking of doing with that resource in terms of the best value that could be employed for the resource that the little resource that we have. I think it's also worth mentioning at this stage in terms of how we're going to evaluate the proposals, and this is in the core documents, but we, as Michelle mentioned, we are going to try and level the playing field as far as one can by having one part of the process which is blind. So the initial scoring of eligible proposals will be done completely blind. We won't know the identity of the PI. We won't know the institution that they've come from or what part of the country they're from, what discipline they originate from. We won't know any of those things. We're just going to look at the application form content. And so we want you to help us with that by not putting personal signifiers in the application form itself. We're not that interested in all the wonderful things you might have done before. We'd like to know more about what you're planning to do in this Flex Fund application and what kind of skills or capacities you might be bringing to bear in order to achieve that. So blind peer review is an important part of our own exercise in bringing EDI into grant funding. So we're looking for at least 2 of those outcomes on the previous slide, and they're things that we've already prefaced. And I just thought it'd be useful to share very briefly. Oh, that's a bit too quick. Back one slide, please. Yeah. So yeah, we're looking for the information is available on the website. Particularly have a look at the FAQ document, which has got a lot of very specific information about the application process and the review process, and read that first before you make any inquiries of us, because it might well be that all of your questions are answered in that. And just before we finish, a few little tips here. We've given as much time as possible to you in order to put these proposals together. It does take time to do that well, so use the time available. You don't get any extra marks for submitting early proposals. They're all going to be evaluated at the same time in the same way. Carefully consider the makeup of your team. We are welcoming the contribution of diverse teams across, say, career stage and discipline and sector. So try and create proposals and create teams that fit together in that way. Start conversations with finance people and with partners, collaborating partners, as early as possible. As Sue mentioned earlier, we want genuine collaboration and co-production, and that needs time in order to work through ideas and see what people want. Be concise. We've made the application form short. I don't think that necessarily makes it easier, because there's no room for waffle. You need to know exactly what you're planning to do, and you need to be able to communicate it in words very concisely. So get straight to the point and make it easy for the peer reviewers in your proposal writing. Signal how you're a good fit and a good match with our award criteria very clearly in the wording that you've got available. The other things to think about would be the fact that, as I've mentioned, we're having a round 2 next year. So think about the entirety of that. It might be that you can scope relatively small pieces of work now that could be a pipeline towards larger awards later. So do think that through. And finally, just to say, you know, as is pretty typical, be resilient. Many of the applications, unfortunately, will not be successful just because we've got limited resource. That doesn't mean your ideas are not good or they can be recycled in other places in other ways. But be prepared for that. But do submit high quality proposals. We're looking for these, and there are other ways that you can be involved in Access regardless of how this process works in terms of our PhD summer schools and training activities and annual assemblies. And we do welcome you to be involved in those other ways too, as well as this flexible fund round 1 call. So I think that's pretty much everything we were going to say. The documentation is there on the next slide through links. And I think Peter has been carefully looking at queries and answering them, and Kate's been available as well. Is there anything on that we'd like to touch on before we close today? Sarah, do you know what?
Okay, we've got.
Whether
Peter's
coming in now, or
Peter is due to come in. I'm not sure where he is. We have, I think he's having a look at Padlet. In the meantime, we have had somebody post a question on chat. So perhaps we can have a go at answering that one. So we've got a question from Lynn. Can you have an international partner?
Yes, you can, but you need to read the fine print of ESRC eligibility. So yes, international partners, international co-Is are welcome, but there are certain funding stipulations associated with that you need to be careful and mindful of. Those are in the FAQs, so do look at that first because we're following ESRC criteria and eligibility rules.
Okay.
No, I don't know if you're aware, a lot of us were kicked out. So Peter might have been kicked out along with the rest of us.
Right, okay. Sorry, Beth. Yeah, I was anyway. I didn't know if it was just me or some kind of issue with Zoom. So apologies for that, everybody, if you've had to leave and then come back in again, or people have been booted out. So it's not what we had planned, that's for sure.
No, I think a lot of people are back
Could I just add in?
Sorry, Sue.
Great.
I was just going to say, in case anyone's not seen it on the Padlet, Beth has also put up that if anybody is interested in a non-academic partner with the Natural Environment Social Research Network, which is all the main agencies from Scotland, England and Wales, please contact Beth. Her contact details are in the Padlet, and we can always try and help either directly or to facilitate a non-academic partnership elsewhere.
Great. Sounds good.
Thanks, Sue. We've got a couple more questions. I know we are running over now, but if we perhaps take another 2, those that are on the Padlet, because I can't see the Padlet at the moment, we'll respond to those, and we'll make sure that they are posted on the website, and we'll make sure as well through Eventbrite that we make, we answer those. So the couple that are on the chat, we've got a question, is it okay to have a government stakeholder involved?
Yes, it's absolutely fine. In fact, it's welcome. It's actually welcome. So yeah, that's absolutely fine. We're open to teams of applicants. They have to be led by an academic, but we're looking for teams of applicants that involve participants from other sectors. So that could be third sector, it could be public sector, it could be business industry, but we do welcome applications that come from those kind of diverse sectoral teams. Absolutely.
Another question, Patrick. Is there any instruction about the duration of our proposal? It's from Cheng Wen.
Yeah. That's in the FAQs. Go and look at the FAQs and you'll find out the answer to that question. It's there, it's clear.
Another question from Marianne: will the fund cover the hours of the PI and co-Is?
It will if you put them in the financial resource that you're asking for. So I think what you need to do is to think carefully about what time resources are required, and then have conversations with university finance and your colleagues on the team to think about what sufficient time is necessary and how they should be costed. So coming back to the points I made earlier, start those conversations with university finance people early and think carefully about the maximum resource available and what's the best use of that resource in order to achieve your proposal's goals.
Thanks, Patrick. Another quick question: would this call fund research on sustainable finance and investment?
Well, as we said, it's about thinking about how social science can contribute to solving environmental challenges. And so if you think it fits that, then it works, okay? I'm not going to get into discussions today about whether we're doing this topic or that topic. I mean, it's quite a broad area. It's about addressing environmental challenges and bringing the social sciences to bear. So if you think your proposal fits with that overall goal, then go for it, would be my advice.
Okay, 2 more questions, and then I think we'll finish, and then we'll scoop up any more questions and get the answers to everyone. Will part of round 2 funding be allocated to successful round 1 bids, or are they separate?
At this stage, we've not made any firm decision on how we're going to structure round 2 in terms of giving preference to successful round 1s or not. So that decision has not yet been taken, so I can't say either way whether we will or we won't. I suspect we'll have an open call, but we haven't made that decision yet.
And last question: can the September start date be delayed? If so, by how much? And when must, or it's more than one question, when must all round 1 projects be completed by? So timescales.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on the extent of the delay. We don't really want projects to be starting way after all the other ones funded on this round, because we're looking to have a pipeline of round 1 projects feeding into round 2 and beyond. So I think it would depend on the extent of the delay and the reasons for it. But we're quite keen to get the Flex Fund mobilized early. So I think it would depend on the duration, but we're looking for projects to start sooner rather than later, and with that September date in mind. If it was a couple of weeks or a month or 2, it might be okay, but we'd have to look at that quite carefully. It's not what we're planning at the moment.